Today I thought I'd do a quick video on reindeer and their adaptations to living in their cold environments, and got my little reindeer shirt. I probably should be back here actually. Got my little reindeer Christmas jumper on, and we're just gonna go straight into it. So reindeer are known as a circumpolar species, and which means they live pretty much all within the Arctic Circle, except for where they've been relocated. They're very well adapted to living within their Arctic Circle, but it should be worth noting that reindeer's natural range has decreased a lot, and a lot of this is due to the usual thing of human pressure, but also because at the end of the last ice age, as the ice and snow retreated, they weren't adapted to living further south in warmer climates, so they would naturally have regressed north. Because where they live in the Arctic Circle, it's a very tough and hard life for creatures. Constant snows and cold, bitter, so you have to be adapted to living there really. And reindeer have done this exceptionally well. Let's start with the feet anyway. Reindeer's feet they're quite large, and this helps to spread out their body weight and provide grip when they're trying to walk or trudge through deep snows and snow drifts. Pretty much how they do it is up to about here, probably, whatever the equivalent will be under the snow, and that'll be gliding through the snow, because underneath the snow there's packed snow, so they won't sink down through that. So reindeer feet are composed of 2 toes and 2 dew claws. Now dew claws are, if you're familiar with dogs, when they have like a digit hanging off one of their paws, that is essentially a dew claw. But in reindeer, they've evolved to act as essentially toes. And because of how they have quite large feet for such a, not small animal, but for their size, relatively large feet. And this helps spread out their weight evenly and also provides grip. And what they do is, this part of their leg, I suppose, will be underneath the snow at most of the time, and they'll plow through it. And they also have this technique called cratering, which they use their hooves to dig into the snow and try to find whatever remaining bit of grass or anything else they can forage. And then moving further up the body, reindeer have these tendons. I mean, we all have tendons, fair enough. But reindeer tendons make this kind of like clicking sound, kind of like. So this, as you can imagine, in the polar regions, if there's a snowdrift and it's very dark and their visibility is quite poor, these tendon clicks have actually become like an adaptation to keep communication within the herd, which is really cool. So like they'll be walking along, and as they walk, as like you can imagine, they put down their foot and then their heel clicks back up and they'll just go, and then all the reindeer herd will do this. And it's just really cool that their body has adapted to making these sounds to keep the herd together and to know where each other are. And obviously when you're being chased by wolves or whatever, knowing where your herd is very important, because once you get separated, you're going to get targeted and then you're going to die, essentially. Reindeer fur or coats they're very similar to polar bears actually, if anyone's familiar with how polar bears work. So they'll have a thick inner layer which helps keep them warm and regulates their body temperature, and then on their outer layer they have this thin hollow hairs which act as sort of similar to birds in a way, where they'll allow them to keep in the temperature when it's cold if they need to, and they can move out, the hairs can flip out and leave the air go out if they're getting too hot. Similar helps with the body temperature, body regulation. And also this hollow hair stops their inner coats getting wet if they need to go into the water, or heavy rain or whatever, snow I guess, stops it from seeping in and making their inner body cold. Then moving further up again, we have their lips, and their reindeer lips are very similar to I suppose they're very similar in a lot of ways to cows and other grazers, but they move very quickly and they can move snow out of the way once they've done their cratering, which I mentioned. bit earlier into the ground. Once they've done the bit of cratering, they can use their lips to very quickly search through and pick up bits of grass and bits of lichen. Especially, I think lichen is very important for reindeers and their diet, especially late winter. Then moving up again, you have their noses also help regulate their body temperatures quite a bit. So when they breathe in, they'll warm up the air, and so the cold air isn't going into the lungs, and then as they exhale, the nose will cool down the air again, and then it's kind of like a heat exchange sort of system going on in their nose. So at all times the cold air is being cooled down, and then by cooling down this air, the warm air inside is, that was terribly explained, but heat exchange in their nose, so cold air comes in, warm air goes out. But no. Reindeer eyes, like many animal eyes, have this layer of tissue called tapetum lucidum, and this essentially helps them to see more during dark conditions. But what's really cool is during the day, reindeer eyes will be golden like most mammals, or most animals, sorry, and at night they will change colour to a deep blue, which is really cool, and it kind of gives them a mirror appearance. And it's similar if you see like cattle at night time and you see a light shine on, they look freaky. Something similar to that, but because of their extreme adaptation, or like they're not extreme adaptations, but how they'll need to, during the summer months, they'll have long days of bright light glaring off snow back into their eyes, so they need to be able to reflect this and not become susceptible to it, because at night time they need to dilate their pupils as much as possible to leave as much light in. So then during the day they'll do the opposite and keep their eyes undilated as much as possible to keep light out, which is, it's just really cool. And a lot of animals actually have really cool adaptations, but we just don't necessarily observe them. And I guess the ones in extreme environments are a lot easier to analyze, because you know, they're like, oh, you're living in the cold, so you can see why they're living in the cold. Whereas something like a dog or a cat, yes, they do have their own adaptations to their own environments, but they're not necessarily as obvious. Anyway, moving on to their antlers, and probably their most famous part, their antlers. And reindeer antlers, they're one of the largest of any deer species, and they're really cool, and they form in like really like windy and weird formations, and this is due to the velvet that produces them and how it grows, but it's insane. But what's really cool is both male and female reindeers actually have antlers, and they both shed them once a year, and then they'll regrow them. But male antlers will start growing theirs in February and shed them in November, just the start of December. And I know many of you are thinking, but wait, Santa's reindeers have antlers. But you have to remember, Santa's reindeers can also fly, and they're very special and magical reindeer. So it doesn't actually, they're probably actually just a different subspecies that hasn't been studied yet. So that's probably the reason why they can fly and they don't shed their antlers at the same time. But also, they won't need to shed their antlers because they don't perform the same ecological niche as, you know, wild reindeer. They're kept lovely and snug in the North Pole and provided for. The males shed theirs in December. Females will shed theirs in February, or whenever, pretty much just soon after calving, and that's pretty much reindeer. So that brings me to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making this video. So I want to say to every one of you, Happy Christmas to you all, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.